Hey everyone, this is Chris Crazy House here, and I want to talk a little bit about the new trailer that DC Comics released about a comic called Gotham High. And to me, this is indicative of what's going on with the major publishers in comics nowadays. So, for those who don't know, who have not seen it, Gotham High is a comic book that's geared towards young adults. I'm assuming mostly young girls because I really don't know any young guy who would want to read anything like this. But so I'm assuming it's young girls, and the premise is about a young teenage Bruce Wayne who's 16 years old and also half Asian, coming back from he got kicked out of prep school and he has to go back to the public high school in Gotham City, and he's friends with Selena Kyle, who we all know eventually becomes Catwoman, and I think they've made her Latina in this iteration. And his other friend, Jack Napier, who later becomes the Joker, and they took the Jack Napier name from the 1989 version of Batman. So this is what these, and of course he's the Jack Napier character. He's the class clown. So I guess the basic plot is that Selena Kyle, she's in love with both guys, and there's going to be a love triangle between the three, and that is going to be the premises or the premise of this series. So we have here Gotham High and all the teen angst and betrayals, backstabbing, love, and romance that goes along with it. And like I said at the beginning, this is very indicative of what these major publishers are trying to do in comics these days and absolutely failing at. They're trying to grab an audience that just isn't there and an audience that just is not interested. Most young girls are really not interested in modern mainstream comics. Not to say that young girls don't read comic books, but they read very different things. They rather read some sort of manga story rather than bother with a mainstream comic like Batman. Even with this type of story hooked onto it, I don't think that they'll be enthused to want to read it. The same way where they're trying to, over at Marvel, get the internet crowd and the LGBT community, young LGBTs, to read comics as well by pandering to them with terrible characters like Safe Space and Snowflake and the Children of the Atom, X-Men, who all have their own different social media feeds or whatever. That, like I said, to me, that's just not the way to write comics for young people. I don't think, well, Marvel, both in their editorial and their writers, are completely out of touch with what's going on with young people nowadays and what they actually want. Because young people do watch cartoons and they are interested in anime and animation and comics, but they're just not interested in the big two. And that's why their industry is failing. There are a lot of independent comic book artists and writers who you would think that's who Marvel and DC would go to in order to grab one of them and see whether their popular series and say, hey, would you like to write something or work on something for us? You would think that, but for some reason, Marvel and DC keeps going to these people who are quote unquote New York Times best-selling authors and asking them to write their comics, as if it's like they are trying to get the clout of these major writers who worked in Hollywood or worked on TV. That's where, what's his name? Kibblesmith, the guy that's writing the New Warriors, that's where he comes from. He comes from TV. A rich, spoiled brat who wrote comedy who was a comedy writer for Stephen Colbert and I think The Daily Show as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that, like, they get these people rather than getting people who actually have a passion and a love for comic books. They have these other people come from these different mediums who have no love and no respect for comic books or even the source material or the creators who created these original characters in the first place. And they have them come in and just sort of run roughshod over the project and just create this. They're creating their own fan fiction slash vanity projects, and no one wants to read it. It's what them and their weak mind fantasized about when I guess they might have seen a comic book here or there, because even Kibble Smith talked about, when I first saw the New Warriors in the 90s, I was intimidated by them. Like, someone saying that should not be allowed to go ahead and write anything for the New Warriors. He should not be allowed to write any comic if he says he didn't like it or was intimidated by those characters. And like I said, you just see this going all through comics nowadays, and that's why the comic industry is failing. And then if the fans react to that in a negative sense, then they want to degrade you by making it seem like there's something wrong with you, or they try to put you into the bigot realm. You must be a bigot or homophobic or whatever, and that's why you don't like these characters. Like, I think they tried to say that anyone who didn't like some of the black characters from the New Warriors, the new Warriors, the woke version, if you didn't like them, you must be racist. But I'm a black man, and I don't like those characters either. So I like the old characters. Like, I like Night Thrasher, and the girl he had for a while, Silhouette. I used to like her as well. The one that was crippled but knew all the acrobatics or whatever. They got rid of that character too. It's like that's stuff like that is why people my age have been turned off to a lot of modern comics, because they just condescend and do terrible things to the characters that we loved and grew up with. And they're not bringing any new audience, because they're trying to pander to them in certain ways, and even they don't like these new concepts. Like the LGBT community doesn't like Snowflake and Safe Space. They actually are insulted by it. And they're insulted by a lot of things that are being done with, like, Children of the Atom. Just like I'm sure young girls will probably be insulted by this new Gotham High. They're not going to watch it. They're not going to read that crap. They have better things to read. Like I said, there are better independent artists out there doing projects that these young people actually like. That's what's going to hook them. Like, I've enjoyed reading more independent comics in the last 10 years than I've enjoyed reading anything mainstream from Marvel or DC. Like, the last semi-decent story I read was the Superior Spider-Man, where his mind got switched with Dr. Octopus, and Dr. Octopus took over Spider-Man's body and was doing all these evil things. And even that, the only reason I even bought that was because I'm a fan of Humberto Ramos, the artist. So that's the only reason I even bought into that, because I just wanted to see his artwork drawing these different types of characters from the Spider-Man universe. But other than that, it was not really anything that's hooked me into wanting to read modern comics. Not even when they got Ta-Nehisi Coates to write Black Panther. They made a big fanfare about that. And he's finally leaving, thank God. There was nothing good or progressive or great that he brought to Black Panther. His stories were terrible, in my opinion. But that's what happens when you get these writers who write terrible articles. Like, he was comparing Obama to Malcolm X and just writing nonsense. And they literally had that fool up in Washington, D.C. to talk about reparations. They got a second-class, second-rate writer to talk about reparations, as if there was no one better to talk about that. Get an economist to talk about that, not some terrible writer to talk about it. But they put him on Black Panther and made a big fanfare about it, and there are idiots out there actually running out there to buy it. And you notice after that first initial issue, or first two issues, no one wanted to read any more of it. And I could have told you that before you bought the first issue. There's nothing great that he's going to come up with. if he does put anything in there, it's just going to be a bunch of nonsense. A bunch of nonsense that you really don't want to read or even bother with. So, this is the trend of mainstream comics. That's why it's going downhill. Corny storylines where you have these writers who come from other mediums to do their vanity projects, who have no real love or respect for the source material. They have no respect for the medium of comics. They have no respect for the audience of comics. They want to come in there and do their own thing and write absolute terrible stories to feed into their own ego. It has nothing to do with satisfying an audience. At least during the 90s, because a lot of people criticize the early 90s when you had the guys from Image, and then you had like Milestone and other crazy stories from Marvel and DC. A lot of people criticize that, but at least they were trying to satisfy the fan base. They were actually trying to do cool things that were, there's more of a community there with comic books and between the creators and the people who read the books. That's why people turned out in droves if there was ever an artist signing at a comic book store or at a convention. That's when that was a big deal. That's why people turned out for those people, because they wanted to meet their favorite creators. And there was a rapport there. People actually had, the people that were actually doing the art, they loved it. They were fans of the people that came before them, like Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, John Byrne, Chris Claremont, and they want to replicate that, but kind of have their own flair around it. Like I said, there was always a mutual respect there between the young artists and the older ones and the ones that came before them. I don't know what the hell there is now. There's no respect there. You can tell just by the way they write these characters. Like I said, everything is a vanity project that is disrespectful to the medium and to the fans. So you folks let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. And for those who want to see my artwork, you can follow me on Instagram. And make sure you go look on this channel if you want to see the rest of all the animations that I've done here. I pretty much put up every animation I've ever worked on, whether it be work for hire or myself, on this channel. I think I'm only missing maybe like 5 or 6 as of now. But even those, I'm trying to work on editing those to put on this channel. And make sure you let me know what you think about them. Anyway, Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.